Good morning, everyone. It's really good to welcome you to this first session. And I want to go on record as saying this is an amazing resource, what Nehemiah Foundation has put together with regard to these 6 realms. Months ago, when Amy first kind of pitched this idea or started talking about it, I thought, well, that sounds like a good idea. And I got Amy Sherman's book and started reading it. And then this last week, when I actually put my hands on this baby, I thought, wow, this is absolutely amazing. And it has a life. I think it'll have a long shelf life. Just want to commend you for doing this. And as Amy said, 6 realms of flourishing, and these are the pages. We have the first one, the good. And that has to do with passing along ethics and mores. How do you do that? How do you flourish in a community? Unfortunately, I don't think that our community is quite there. Because just yesterday morning at a locker room, I heard this sad story about Mo Carpenter and a friend of his walking down the street in Springfield here. Mo and his friend are both black, and as a truck drove by, someone yelled out the window, "Go back to your effing country." And I was just like, if you know Mo Carpenter, he is the kindest, gentlest person. He's not even from another country. This is his country. But there is a lot of room for growth with regard to the good. I don't think it's an accident that this is the first one that we're doing, because upon the good, everything else rests. If there's not goodness, if there's not kindness and well-being as a virtue, we really can't build much on top of that. Amy had also asked me to do just a really quick review on this article that we wrote, and it's actually 3 stories of investing in healthy relationships. The first one is ours. Do you recognize that family? That was a long time ago, 1990, and that's our family. About 11 years into our marriage. 3 kids, busy. We were kind of coexisting by that time, just kind of walking through the steps. We hadn't talked about divorce or anything. But a couple from our church invited us to attend a marriage workshop. It was going to be all day Friday, all day Saturday, and half a day Sunday. How many of you would attend that intensive of a workshop? Just raise your hand. That's what I thought. We said, hey, we're good. You know, this is really for those who really have a lot more struggles. They persisted, and we ended up attending. We did not know what we didn't know. We received a foundation there that has continued to this day, and it's one of the reasons that we're with Encompass Connection Center. One of the parts of this story that many of you may not know is that 2 days later, our 10-year-old daughter, Jessica, way over on the right, was sexually assaulted during the night by an intruder. It was the most traumatic experience of our lives. I don't think I would be standing in front of you sharing this message if it hadn't been for that couple who had persisted and said, Lavern and Rhonda, please attend this. Probably wouldn't be together with Rhonda. And so we're so grateful for this couple and for the investment that we made in that. So the second area of investment, this is in Clark County marriages. Back in 2003, 2004, Bob Suver, who was the director of Job and Family Services, was looking upstream. What can we do to strengthen marriages and families here in Clark County? At that time, we had one of the highest marriage failure rates in the nation. There were as many couples divorcing every year as getting married. That's twice the national average. And so he also talked to Wally Martinson, who was the director of Nehemiah Foundation at the time, John Landis, Turner Foundation. The 3 of them collaborated to launch the ministry that we're a part of right now. It started out as Marriage Savers of Clark County, and later we renamed it to Marriage Resource Center of Miami Valley, and then even more recently, Encompass Connection Center. So what has been the outcome of that? Well, it's been pretty amazing what God can do through human frailty. I'm not a rocket scientist, neither is Rhonda. Our marriage is imperfect. And she would agree. I think she would agree. Some of our people who work with us, they would agree. So what's happened is that over the years, with all of the programs, with making partnerships around the city, churches, social service agencies, the marriage failure rate has dropped 44.7%. This is now less than the national average. It's less than the national average, and we celebrate that. We're not the only ones contributing to it, but we celebrate that, and we're very grateful for that. The third investment is in eternal significance. This is exploring the connection between faith and family. I'm going to have you stand by generations here in a little bit. We're going to start with the boomer generation, and the boomer generation are those born between 1944 and 46 and 64. So if you are in the boomer generation, you go ahead and stand.
I'm too old to stand.
You're too old to stand. We didn't quite. This generation, those who are standing would say about 87% of this generation have some sort of a faith connection. They would identify with a faith connection. You can sit down. The next generation would be the Gen Xers. These are those born between 65 and 1980. Would you stand if you're a Gen Xer? So the percentage goes down. It goes down to 80%. All right? And you can sit. And then the generation after that is the millennials. Let's see how many blessed millennials we have with us. Could we give them a hand? 1981 to 96. These are our millennials. You can be seated. Thank you.
Thank you for coming.
So here's what the research shows. With regard to millennials, and there are generations after this, but just focusing on the millennials who have lived in two-parent families, continuously married households, are way more likely, 78% more likely to attend church. And if you're white, it's 96%. That is an amazing statistic. That somehow the health of mom and dad, those parents, have an impact upon the faith transmission for the children. And so the bottom line of that is investing in healthy marriages and families increases the transmittal of faith to the next generation. Unfortunately, 85% of churches invest nothing in marriages and families. They do nothing with that. When if they would, they could see the transmission of faith being multiplied. And so that's kind of a summary. I mean, you can read the article later if you want, but now you have a little bit of a backdrop of that. Now on to the to kind of what the main elements are that I'll be sharing. And you do have an outline in this little card here. This is just a handy little card that you can take notes on or refer to later. By the way, those statistics that I shared about the faith and family are in this infographic, front and back, and you can see all the resources that the sources that were cited. I want to just shift gears here. 3 very practical and doable investments in healthy relationships. Now I know what you're thinking. I'm already busy. My calendar is full. My kids, I'm running them all over the place, and I don't have time for one more thing. What if we could share with you a couple of low exertion, high leverage ideas and things that you could implement? As I've already shared, Ron and I are so grateful for the 2.5-day investment. This is not going to be a 2.5-day investment for you. The ideas that we're going to share and that you're going to hear from the panel also as we discuss in a bit will be low kind of exertion. The first one is to participate in or donate a healthy relationship course. We've got 4 organizations here that have relationship courses, and those are listed on your outlines. Urban Light, Pregnancy Resource Center, Discipling Another, and Compass Connection Center. Urban Light, and Eli is sitting up here. Eli is a pioneer. He is the tip of the spear with regard to fatherhood. We're very grateful for Eli in our community. And his Fathering Strong app and website. I mean, there's a cool app out there. Now you have to download Mighty Networks app. That's where you get it. You can't just go to Fathering Strong. You have to download the Mighty Networks app, and then in that app you say, I want to go to this. That's something to check out. What he's doing is so valuable. Bright Course is, this is something that Pregnancy Resource Clinic uses, and this is for a lot of prenatal education or just education about how to care for a baby. And so, maybe, especially those of you that are boomers, you're not thinking about this, but maybe you have grandchildren or children that are thinking about this. What about giving them an investment into this? And one way to do that is a $20. I asked Nicole about this. She's the director of Pregnancy Resource Clinic. I asked her, what would be an adequate donation? Because this is a subscription that they have with Bright Course. She said $20. Who can't do $20? That's less than the cost of a meal. Discipling Another. This is something that was launched by our former senior pastor at Fellowship, Grant Edwards. He's been doing this his whole life, but this is now a nonprofit that he has launched to help pass along the faith from one person to the next one. There's like 10 sessions. You're going to hear from Scott and Kim Griffith, who are actually working there, and I think I see Ellen Dudney in the back. She's a board member. She's actually the director there. So we're going to hear a little bit about that. This is such a worthy cause. This is a worthy investment. Before we go to the last one, which is one of our courses, I want to have you vote. In teams, in workplace teams, in workplace settings, which of these two is more important? Is it getting things done, or is it getting along? If you believe that it's the first one, stand to your feet. This is your way of voting. Getting things done. Kind of standing up slowly. Okay, popping up. Sit down. If you believe the answer for you is to get along, would you please stand? Some of you didn't stand.
Don't make me choose.
Yeah, don't make me choose. You can sit down. This is actually a little bit of a trick question. It's kind of like asking, so which is most important for survival, air or water?
Yes.
Well, they're both important. And the part that many businesses don't recognize is that morale and interpersonal relationships in their businesses can have a huge negative impact. There's a study done that it can be at least 50% on your bottom line. Can you imagine that when your folks aren't getting along with each other? That's what Work Smart, Live Well is. We actually launched this quite a few years ago. Scott and Kim with Lee's famous recipe helped us to beta test this. And so it's a relationship course. It's a relationship course for workplace teams. And part of it is virtual, and then the other part is coaching, optional coaching. And there's a rack card also in your handouts. So that's the first one, just to consider either taking a course or donating a course. Let's move on to number 2. Learn the anatomy of anger and how to navigate it productively. How many of you get angry? I mean, do you get angry? Now, some of you get angry at different degrees. We understand that. Anger is not wrong. Anger is part of it's the emotional tool belt that God's given us. But how we respond to it can be quite detrimental. And some research has been done to say that there are actually 3 brains. We have one brain, but 3 sections. The first one is a survival brain. You've been breathing, right? Who's telling you how fast to breathe? Well, that's your survival brain doing that. Your heart is beating. It's keeping you alive. There's a second brain, and that's the emotional brain. That's where our emotions are processed. That's where pain and pleasure and memories and those kinds of things, relationships. So then there's the third part of the brain that doesn't develop fully until we're in our mid-20s. Insurance rates are calibrated this way. That's the thinking brain. We saw this in our son-in-law, Kevin. Yeah. 23, 24, 25, he was still being stupid. 26, he was a genius. I mean, that was really cool. And so inside the emotional part of the brain is the amygdala. The amygdala is a small organ that is designed to help us respond to threats so that you don't have to take it through your thinking brain. If you're driving down the road and all of a sudden a car pulls out, you don't have time to go into your thinking brain. It's a survival instinct that you automatically hit the brakes and you respond that way. In relationships, however, that can get hijacked. And you think that you're trying to survive, and you get into this anger mode, and you say things that you don't mean, you say things that you later regret. And so we call that an amygdala hijacked. So how do you get from an angry brain to a calm brain? That's the age-old question. That's $1 million question right there. And one of the things that we have included in a lot of our courses, our relationship courses, is exactly that. Abby has, she's one of our staff. She works with a lot of individuals that need this, and they have found real benefit in figuring out, what do I do with anger? How can I handle this? And so we actually have a mini course that we've made available just for this experience that you can go to, and it's right here. It's also in your handout. It's in Pathright. There's no cost to it. It's about an hour, and it's just a practical, interactive way of learning some of the elements of how to deal with anger. And these are some of the slides that you can see. We've also used the Instant Pot analogy. How many of you use an Instant Pot? Are you familiar with an Instant Pot? You know, when you turn that thing on, there is a time that is safe to open the lid. There's also a time that it's not safe. You do not want to open the lid. And the metaphor is that anger is a little bit like that. There's pressure on the brain, stuff starts leaking out, and there are two ways to mitigate that. One is time, just let the Instant Pot cool off. The other is to let off some steam. That's kind of a cool little lever that you push and the steam starts coming out. Only after that would you have the safety of taking the lid off of that Instant Pot. And so that's just something to consider. Maybe you can forward this to other people. You know, one of the things in our community that we're concerned about is gun violence. There are probably, this is a complex issue, I'm not trying to simplify it, but would it be accurate, you think, that at least one factor in gun violence is the inability to deal with anger? Yeah. One of our panelists this morning is going to tell you a hair-raising story of how close he came to pulling the trigger of a 16-gauge shotgun when he was almost 18 years old, taking the head of his friend off because he was angry at him. It's not Abby.
No one will
No, you wouldn't be surprised, yeah. So the third, this one is close to my heart because I've just done this with my wife. This is Take the 30-Day Kindness Challenge. Shanti Feldhahn was a former Wall Street researcher and analyst, and she found and discovered the impact of kindness in relationships. 89% of relationships improved when one of them did the kindness challenge, just one of them. It doesn't even take both of them doing it. 89%. Here's the essence of it. Nothing negative to them or anyone else about them. It's number one. Number 2, praise one thing about them and to someone else. This is on a daily basis, all right? This is every day. And then finally, one small act of kindness or generosity. So you pick one target and just do this for 30 days. There's a chapter in her book called Nixing the Negatives. Things like, oh, this is really going to be hard. That's kind of a negative. Wouldn't it be better to say, I need to think before I speak, and I can do this? Sighing, like exasperation, irritation, and on and on. One of the things that I noticed when I did this in August, is that I began to change. Somehow, the action of being kind intentionally to my wife, and there were times, believe me, that I wanted to do or say something unkind to her. Sarcasm or some sort of a retort or mentioning something negative that she had done. I didn't. Yesterday, I asked Rhonda, so how was the 30-day kindness experience for you? She was really gracious, and she said, Lavern, I noticed that something was different, but in fairness, you're already a kind person, and so it's not like this light and dark, contrast, like suddenly you just became a totally different person. I received that. But I also noticed that Rhonda began to respond differently. Rhonda became kinder. I invite you to at least one of these 3 ideas that we've put before you. Just at least one. These are very practical and doable. Participate in or donate to a course. Learn the anatomy of anger or take the kindness challenge. At least do one of those, if not all 3. So one of the things that any kind of change in behavior has as a backdrop is the vector principle. The vector principle says, you don't even have to change many degrees of course to end up at a very different destination. How many of you would say that's true? You don't have to change to 90 degrees. 5 degrees, 10 degrees, that'll get you at a totally different airport. And so this is the principle that I just want to leave you with, that it doesn't even take large changes to make a huge difference over time and distance.